Inside, GM Carb clean rooms. Why millions of Q-jets felt identical. Millions of Rochester Quadrajets were produced for hundreds of different engine combinations. Small block Chevys, Pontiac 400s, Olds 455s, Cadillac 472s, and 500s. Automatic and manual. Light cars and heavy cars. Sea level and high altitude. Hot climates and cold climates. By garage logic, that should have been a disaster. Different engines and loads should have meant hesitation bog and inconsistency. Yet when these carburetors were new, they ran the same. Cold starts were predictable. Part throttle was smooth. Transitions under load felt controlled. No bog, no randomness. If the Quadrajet was truly finicky and temperamental, how did GM sell and warranty millions of vehicles without drowning in complaints? Something important happened before these carburetors left the factory. A level of control GM never talked about. By the mid-1960s, GM was not building cars for dyno sheets or drag strip bragging rights. They were building machines that had to survive scale. In 1968 alone, GM produced over 9 million vehicles, many of them carbureted, sold through thousands of dealers with wildly different skill levels. A carburetor that ran great only when perfectly tuned was a liability. A carburetor that ran acceptably every time in every state with every driver was an asset. This is where the Quadrajet purpose is often misunderstood. GM did not need the strongest carb on paper. They needed one that delivered repeatable drivability under part throttle cold starts, heat soak altitude changes, and emissions creep without constant adjustment. That priority shaped every decision Rochester made. Compare that to Holley during the same era. Holley carbs were excellent performance tools, but they assumed a knowledgeable hand. Jetting power valves, accelerator pumps, all expected intervention. GM could not assume that. Most Quadrajets would never be touched again after delivery. So when people later complained that Quadrajets felt different from one car to another, they missed the timeline. From the factory, they were not different at all. The real story starts with how GM engineered consistency first and hid the method behind the scenes. The reason is not tuning skill, it is manufacturing control. What most people never realize is that Quadrajets were never tuned in public spaces. They were calibrated in environments most mechanics never had access to and never would. Rochester Products Division was never a hot rod shop, and it was never meant to be. By the mid-1960s, Rochester operated more like an industrial calibration lab than a carburetor factory. The goal was not creativity or peak output. The goal was repeatability at scale, measured in millions of units. At the center of that effort was Bill Scott, the engineer most closely associated with the Quadrajet final architecture. Scott and his team were not chasing maximum airflow numbers. They were solving a harder problem. How to make a mechanically complex carburetor behave the same way on a 327 Impala in Michigan and a 455 Buick in Arizona without relying on dealer skill or owner knowledge. Internal Rochester documentation from the late 1960s treated calibration data as manufacturing control, not service information. Inside Rochester, Quadrajets passed through controlled clean room environments. Temperature and barometric conditions were regulated to remove atmospheric variables from calibration. Instead of gasoline, technicians used Solvasol as a test fluid, chosen for its consistency and safety, allowing precise wet flow measurements without the volatility of pump fuel. This wasn't about simulating real driving in a casual sense. It was about isolating variables. Vacuum pumps replaced engines. These systems reproduced manifold vacuum signals at specific load points. Mechanical setters adjusted air valve tension, pull-off rates, and metering behavior while watching measured responses, not listening to sound or relying on feel. Each carburetor was evaluated across multiple simulated load conditions, not just idle or wide-open throttle. The scale mattered. A single shift could process thousands of carburetors, yet each unit still passed mechanical inspection and flow verification. That level of consistency was not accidental, and it was impossible in a garage environment. This was not hand-tuning in the hot rod sense. It was analog simulation at an industrial level designed to ensure that when a Quadrajet left Rochester, it behaved predictably before anyone ever put a wrench on it. The enduring myth is convenient. GM leaned out the Quadrajet for economy, and emissions strangled performance and left the rest to chance. That story survives because it is simple. The alternative is less comfortable. GM knew exactly where the power was and deliberately controlled access to it. Jets were never the secret. Timing was. At the center of the system sat the secondary air valve. Many mechanics treated it like an on-off flap. It was not. The air valve was governed by a torsion spring calibrated in inch ounces and by manifold vacuum acting through a pneumatic delay. The throttle plates could be wide open, yet airflow remained restricted until the engine generated enough signal. That meant the carb decided when power arrived, not the driver. On paper, that looked conservative. In practice, it was control. The choke pull-off reinforced that control. Officially, it existed for cold start drivability. In reality, it functioned as a vacuum dashpot that limited how quickly the secondary air valve could move. Different pull-offs used different internal orifice sizes measured in thousandths of an inch. GM matched those rates to engine displacement, vehicle weight, rear gearing, and converter characteristics. Release the air valve too fast, and the signal collapsed, creating the bog that later earned the carb its reputation. Then came the metering rods and hangers. Most people focused on rod diameter, but Rochester engineers focused on when enrichment began. Hanger height controlled rod lift timing relative to airflow. Two Quadrajets could share identical jets and rods, yet deliver very different fuel curves if the hanger was wrong. That information never reached end users. It lived in internal calibration charts. Technically, the Quadrajet could flow roughly 600 to over 800 CFM depending on configuration. But it never dumped airflow instantly. Air increased in response to load, not throttle angle. That was the loophole. A mechanical secondary carb, like a Holley 4150 or 4160, delivered power by pedal position with the secondary throttle plates mechanically linked to driver input. The Quadrajet delivered power by demand, using vacuum signal and air valve resistance to decide when the engine was actually ready. GM did not hide horsepower by choking airflow. They hid it by controlling when the engine was allowed to use it. And once that timing logic left the factory, the question was not whether the Quadrajet would fail. It was who would break it first. The Quadrajet did not become a problem on the assembly line. It became a problem the moment it left the factory. This is where the Quadrajet reputation actually collapsed, and the timing matters. What failed was not the carburetor, but the environment it depended on. At the factory, Quadrajets were calibrated with controlled airflow regulated vacuum signals and internal charts that tied metering rods, hanger heights, pull-off rates, and air valve tension together as a single system. Secondary air valve springs were set in inch-ounce ranges. Pull-off restrictions were sized in thousandths of an inch. Air bleed alignment and casting flatness mattered. Everything assumed the carb would remain mechanically true. The dealer service bay had none of that. No flow bench, no vacuum simulation, no charts showing how a hanger change altered enrichment timing across the entire load curve, and no training that explained why the Quadrajet was not throttle-driven but load-driven. The failure chain was predictable. Air horns were over-torqued past spec, warping the casting and distorting signal paths. Secondary air valves were loosened to wake it up, dumping airflow faster than the engine could sustain vacuum. Pull-offs were swapped or bypassed, removing the pneumatic delay that controlled timing. Metering rods were changed without understanding hanger geometry, shifting the fuel curve out of phase with airflow. This is where Quadrabog was born, not on the assembly line but in the field. Here is the uncomfortable part. GM knew this would happen. They never released full calibration logic to dealers because doing so would have multiplied mistakes, not reduced them. It was safer to let the Carb take the blame than to expose a system most technicians were never equipped to maintain. Silence was not an oversight. It was the safest option GM had. By that point, Rochester calibration logic was considered internal manufacturing control, not dealer-level service knowledge. GM did not sell carburetors. GM sold cars that had to start idle and drive acceptably in the hands of owners who would never touch a screwdriver. Defending the Quadrajet publicly would have required explaining clean room calibration, load-based airflow control, vacuum timing, and internal component relationships that most dealers were not trained to understand. That explanation would not have helped marketing. It would not have helped warranty costs, and it almost certainly would have led to more people taking carbs apart and breaking them. There was also a cultural divide. Holley thrived in the aftermarket where tuning was expected and mistakes were part of the process. Quadrajet lived in the OEM world where precision mattered more than adjustability and consistency mattered more than peak numbers. When electronic fuel injection arrived, GM did not migrate this analog knowledge forward. EFI replaced the problem entirely. The calibration logic that once lived in springs, vacuum delays, and metering geometry was absorbed into software. The Quadrajet was not disproven. It was simply left behind along with the people who truly understood it. This is the point where most people realize the story they learned was incomplete. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable because it challenges a belief most people have carried for decades. If you ever wrote off a Quadrajet as hit or miss or swapped one for a Holley after chasing a bog, you could not explain you were never comparing two equal systems. You were comparing a Quadrajet that had lost its factory calibration logic to a brand new aftermarket Carb designed to be tuned by hand. That comparison was never fair, and GM understood that from the beginning. Most mechanics and enthusiasts never realized they were judging the system after its original rules had already been erased. Here is the part that rarely gets discussed. Once the Quadrajet left the controlled environment of calibrated air valve spring rates, pull-off orifice sizing, and rod and hanger geometry matched to engine load, GM had no reason to help anyone restore that logic. Publishing it would have encouraged untrained hands to chase vacuum signals measured in inches of mercury and airflow delays measured in fractions of a second. That would have produced more broken carbs, not fewer. So the narrative shifted. Quadrajet became fussy, while a Holley became simple. Not because one was better, but because one rewarded pedal input and the other demanded understanding of load vacuum decay, enrichment timing, and airflow progression. Widebands and dynos show numbers. They do not explain why airflow arriving too early collapses signal. Quadrajet is not difficult. The system was buried, and most people were never taught how to read it. Here is the question that refuses to go away. If GM could achieve this level of precision using nothing more than vacuum signals, calibrated springs, and shaped metal, how many other mechanical systems have been written off as outdated simply because the people who understood them disappeared? The Quadrajet is not a relic. It is physical proof that analog American engineering once reached a level of control most people no longer recognize. What failed was not the hardware, but the knowledge around it. If you ever worked with a Quadrajet that ran right in a way you could not quite explain, tell that story. This is not nostalgia. It is the recovery of forgotten engineering logic. Once you see that, you cannot unsee it.